You're listening to the Live Free podcast. I'm your host, Christine, author, speaker, mentor, and guide. I'm here today to discuss living life after adversity, to discuss living life fully once again, a life of hope, peace, and resiliency, a life fully embodied. I utilize the lessons that I learned going through not one, but two primary cancers. I'm here today to guide you to your joy, turn your pain into power, and lead you back to yourself. Hello and welcome to another episode of the Live Free podcast. Today we have Michelle Paul on the podcast. Michelle is the creator of Sovereign Soul Energy Alchemy. She specializes in serving our community's spiritual and energetic well-being, allowing for healing to take place in the mind, body, spirit connection as a whole. Michelle compassionately supports you by bringing your being into balance through the use of universal holistic healing arts such as Quantum Healing Hypnosis, past life regression, shamanism, holy fire Reiki, sound therapy, Gong Baths, sound baths, Cacao Ceremonies, plant medicine ceremonies, community events, wellness retreats, Reiki Training and Mentorship, Sovereign Sound Therapy Training, Mentorship, and Apprenticeship. Wow. Okay. Michelle has the absolute honor of taking alongside hundreds of clients as a helper and guide as they choose the path of healing for themselves. She has absolutely loved humbly facilitating major releases in stress, anxiety, fear-based and limiting belief systems, visible shifts in how clients respond to triggers and everyday stressors, improved sleep and quality of relationships, to stepping fully into their power, soul purpose, and mission at an accelerated rate. Michelle is, in a nutshell, amazing. So I'm really looking forward to this podcast. Let's get started. Welcome, Michelle. Thank you so much for coming to the podcast. And thank you for sharing your light with us.
Thank you so much for having me. It's great to be here.
It's my pleasure. So let's start a little bit about where you are in the world and what are your humble beginnings?
Okay. Right now I'm in Swanson, Saskatchewan in Canada, for anyone who doesn't know that. My humble beginnings, okay. How far back do we go? I grew up on a farm in British Columbia. So yeah, little island, Vancouver Island. I remember like sticks and mud being what we played with and having animals on the farm and working very, very hard. Like seeing cougars was like an everyday occurrence, and bears.
Wow.
So we had dirt bikes and I was a total tomboy. It was like, yeah, my nickname was even Mikey. Like my dad wanted a son to be the firstborn. I was the firstborn of now 6 children. So pretty big sized family.
No kidding.
And I just remember like my guy friends loving coming over, even though my dad would put everyone to work. So we would do chores and then we would get to like ride the dirt bikes. And we just like ride up the mountain all day. And if we saw cougars, which was frequent, we had a way to get out of there fast. But I just remember there being a big pond like behind our house, and you know, collecting frogs and snakes and making like terrariums was like an everyday occurrence. So that's like part of my upbringing. Yeah. I did not get along with my siblings at all. I'm such a black sheep. It was like, yeah, fight or flight mode a lot in my childhood. My brother and I fought like physically and fought for our parents' attention. And yeah, that was just something that was a regular occurrence as well. My sister and I kind of like competed against each other. My mom kind of competed with me as well. So it was like this weird, tumultuous, toxic relationships, but like also even back then as a kid, like aware that I had kind of chosen that. And like just lessons after lessons. But even as a child, I remember being sort of like the safe place for my mom to come talk to and like kind of unload her stuff. And then my stepdad separately to come talk to me and like unload his stuff. And it was always about each other. And I remember actually from like 5 years to even before I left home at 15, like counseling them, even as a kid. And, you know, my brother coming to complain about my sister coming to complain about my brother. And then my aunt even like, you know, chatting with me about stuff that's going on in her life, and my grandmother. And it was just like, I kind of was always like a space holder, or where people would kind of like, trauma dump their stuff. And that was really challenging as a kid, because I wasn't really fully aware of like, how do I separate my energy from everyone else's? And how do I just be a kid when my environment and experiences are really wanting to force me to grow up so quickly, being the oldest of 6 children, and like essentially raising my siblings as well when my parents weren't around. I grew up really, really fast, but I do remember those tender moments of like caring for the animals on the farm. And even though we'd wake up at 5 a.m., have to take care of like the pigs, the chickens, and like the dreaded cow that would like attack us. So I remember my brother and I being like rock, paper, scissors for whoever has to feed the cow. And her name was Jellybean. And I'm not gonna lie, we really enjoyed eating her later because it was like torture. So my brother would lose a lot and he would get bucked by her constantly. And like, it was just, it was hilarious. So even though it was like, you know, I always felt like as a kid, like slave labor, there was actually some really beautiful moments of like building us into who we are today. And like just cleaning the chicken coop, collecting the eggs, like taking care of the pigs, and like, take a minute and ride the pigs if you want.
I love it.
Oh my gosh. And then like, you know, going to school was like a blessing because you got to leave the house, you got to be with friends, and then come home as like chores start all over again, feed everybody, clean all the pens out. You know, if you had a friend over, you were lucky because then you put them to work too. And then you got to like go and ride the bikes and do all the fun stuff and hang out up the mountain. So yeah, that was kind of my childhood. We lived on a small farm, and then we moved into like town, which was like a big town, which was Duncan. And I just remember feeling like the tiniest fish in the biggest sea, and like just super awkward, and not really knowing where to fit in, and kind of being like the floater that there's like, I can relate to everyone, but I like don't know that I can fully let my authentic self shine through. So I remember just like floating through high school and avoiding being bullied, and it was just a wild ride in that experience. And then when I was 15, just about 15 years old, I moved out and I had my own apartment. So that's a dangerous age to be on your own. Got my first job, like worked at McDonald's, super humble beginnings. I liked it because I got free food. And then I remember even like my first apartment, it was like an elderly complex, and she would always say to me, the manager, like, you need to be quiet when you come. I can hear you coming up the stairs at 1 a.m. And I'm like, I just finished my shift. Like, I'm sorry, I'm being as quiet as I can. And then like not having enough money for furniture and having, I don't know if you remember this, Christine, but I think it was called Spencer's, where they had like, just the weird kind of gift store. But they had inflatable couches, and that's what I could afford at the time. So I had like an OG inflatable couch.
Oh my goodness.
I just remember her being so angry because I would like sit on that thing and be like, it would like squeak. And it was like literally paper thin walls. So that was kind of my upbringing. I got into a lot of fights, just protecting myself. I don't know if anyone here knows Duncan, but it is a hard out town. And like in those areas. Yeah. So, like an everyday occurrence is like walking down the street and somebody liking the shoes that you're wearing and just like jumping you to get your shoes. Yeah. So I got jumped quite a lot. I walked from where we moved, like down a big hill. It took me about an hour to get to school and back. Uphill both ways, you know how it goes.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah, and Yeah, so there was a few times where, I got roughed up pretty bad, and you just learn to like really look out for yourself. And I remember just thinking like, if this is what high school life is like, I just want to like survive it. And there's a couple times where I held my own, and then it was kind of like, okay, well, Michelle's got our back. Like she can stand up for herself, and I had that going for me. And so nobody really messed with me after that. And I was kind of protected. And I know I always had my guides with me, even back then when I, took some lumps. But yeah, it was interesting. And I think like that whole experience, living sort of like a harder sort of street life, even though I had like a family home, it was like almost safer for me to be on the streets than it was like at our family home sometimes. And like then living on my own and realizing actually how hard it was to provide for myself, and like having that great appreciation for my parents of like, well, things were kind of messed up and there was like a lot of trauma, but at least I had, some values, some core values, and hard work ethic and appreciation for a roof over my head and food in my belly and things like that. So I think that really gave me some life perspective. And yeah, shortly after graduating, I went to Victoria, and just like most freshly graduated kids, just experimented and played around. And then I ended up in Vancouver, and actually the sort of like I call it street training really really came in handy in Vancouver, because again, small fish, big sea. I thought Vancouver was so huge. I got into like the wrong groups, and I did start my own business, and I started to sort of like manage other people and find gigs for DJs and like things like that, do big events and work in like a corporate sort of field, but like still doing what I loved. And I thought I was like, yeah, crushing it at that time. And it was mostly in the nightlife scene. So again, just like, finding the right people and letting them have your back and creating like my own family. Essentially, like my chosen family was really important for me. And I think I was living in Vancouver for about 6 years when I kind of had a relationship that was teaching me how to take back my power, a narcissistic abusive relationship that, I see like narcissists and empaths as like magnets, just right together and such teachers for one another. And so I learned what it was like to essentially date somebody that was like my stepdad in all the worst ways, and in very abusive ways, like mentally, emotionally, and there's some physical abuse there too. And to really be like, Michelle, and it took about 4 years of on and off, like separating and going back to like choose myself. But I think through those like darkest of times, it actually was the biggest teacher of anything. It was kind of like going back to those high school days again, but in a different aspect. And I just remember feeling like a shell of myself. And I'd actually chosen this person based on like very shallow, appearances or status or whatever it was. And it wasn't genuine. And so the universe was like, oh, we're going to teach her some lessons. And I definitely would say I went through the ringer. But I did come out. And even though I came out of it like a shell of myself, I think that it was like going to university in just so many invaluable ways of like, well, I know what I never want to do again. I know what I would never accept, for example, if I were to have a daughter, I would never want this for her. And how do I rebuild myself? So where I felt like I was very successful, met this person and kind of came crumbling down, none of that really mattered. And what was left was the shell of me, but it was still me and it was still my soul. And so I remember having like a huge awakening through that, and being kind of like, Michelle, what are you doing with your life? Like, you've been through so much, you chose so much. It's time for the trauma to end and it's time for the healing to begin. And it was just before my sons were born in 2012. And I remember actually being so awake and so aware, and this isn't an ego thing, it just is how it was, but that I couldn't relate to anyone anymore. And so like my group of friends were just like, we don't know who you are. And they actually took me aside and were like, I think you need to check your ego. And I was like, whoa, no, it's not ego. I'm just like seeing things like clearly for the first time. And, I don't know where to go with my life now. It was like everything that I thought I knew was just like, boom, gone. And I was starting fresh again. And when we start fresh, you probably know this, we can't always take everyone with us. And so I literally felt like I felt so alone, and it kind of brought me back to like being in that apartment all by myself, again, like that shell of myself as a young teenager, very impressionable, but here I was as a young adult. And it's like, how can I do things differently? Like, I'm not going to repeat these cycles. And even though they kind of like had this intervention, it was like, it did help me to see that those weren't my people, and to really start to be like more intentional with who I let into my field and who I was going to like spend my time with. Right. And so even though I appreciated the one piece that I could take away, and the opportunity to stand up for myself, like, hey, you're not seeing me in the light that I know I'm in, you're projecting. And I didn't even really know what that word meant back then, but I definitely see that clearly now. And so those people left my experience, and I was like really truly like starting from scratch. And in those moments of like, okay, like I don't even know who I am, I found out that I was pregnant with my twins. And so that was like, okay, like how am I going to do this? I can't be a mom in Vancouver. Like, I grew up on a farm. I want that for them. And I didn't even know it was twins at first. So when I went for that first ultrasound, and they're like, do you know that you have two? I was like, holy shit. Like, no, I didn't, but like not shocked though at the same time, because twins run in my family. Right. And then these aha moments of like, okay, that's why I went through everything I went through in childhood. That's why I chose all these toxic relationships, looking for the father figure. Right. And so just like on repeat, it was like, okay, it's so that I can be the mom that I know I can be. It's like, I can check off all those things that I don't want to be. And whatever this new awakening is, I have no idea. I don't need to know. Like, I'm just going to trust. And so I just went into this like total surrender, and like day by day of growing these little humans and letting it take me where it takes me. And just as I was saying that, 2 magpies just went by the window. Okay, that was cool. Bird medicine. So it was very interesting, because even in the hospital, I remember, their birth father coming and being under the influence and totally intoxicated and not even able to function, but in his own way still showing up. And how the nurses like felt pity for me, and I felt like a victim again. And I was like, I'm not a fucking victim. Like, this is not my story anymore. I'm rewriting this. And I just said, like, there's no relationship here. I'm gonna do this on my own. I'm gonna raise these little babes the opposite of how I was raised. And with some of those core values, and out of a city setting that really Vancouver is challenging. Like, just to survive, you need like 4 jobs and a side hustle. And I had all of those things. And success just comes with so much dark energy. In that aspect, it was for me. And it wasn't anything I wanted. So I literally had the boys. I moved out of like BC. I had no support from my family, and I was like, I don't need their support. It's not what it's meant to be. Like, I'm meant to do this on my own. And there was a olive branch reached out, and I was offered an opportunity to come to Saskatchewan. And I was like, I've only ever heard of people coming from Saskatoon and Regina. Like, those are the only places I'd heard of to Vancouver for like, film, or to go to school, or for whatever education they were called to. And that's all I'd ever heard. And I was like, I have no idea what to expect. So actually their dad's mom offered, come stay in our basement, like humble beginnings again, like 5.0. You can start looking for work, you can go to the gym. And I was so depressed. Like, my postpartum was like many, I'm sure, where you go from having these beautiful babies in your tummy and everyone loving on you and rubbing your tummy and supporting you, and doing all the beautiful things to like when you have them and you're exhausted and no one seems to be around anymore and you're just really like on your own and you realize how alone you can be, especially as a single parent. So I just remembered the thought of having a job and having some freedom and actually going to like move my body and recreate my body after having children. And I was like, I'll be there. Like, sold everything out of my Vancouver apartment, like dirt cheap. I remember having a clothing sale and I had like all the fanciest clothes. I'm like, I'm never going to wear these out there. I just thought I'd be in like parkas and jeans and like people don't wear that kind of stuff. So I remember just like everyone coming over, rifling through all my stuff. And I had a little car and I packed up everything I could fit in a trailer and I drove out here. And my sons at the time were just over 1 year old. So we've been here now, 11 years.
Wow. Man.
Started fresh, got to be who we wanted to be. And like, I'm so grateful for Saskatchewan. I remember getting like low income housing, and that was just like, boom. And I remember getting education covered. Got my first year of nursing, decided, that I'd rather take care of elderly and do that kind of stuff. And then I got into working with Eagle's Nest and taking care of, children that had been taken from their homes or troubled youth and things like that. And I was always caring for someone. Like all of my career has been some sort of customer service or humility care. And so I remember just being a little troubled by working with those kids and seeing how kind of broken the system is. And it reminded me of my childhood and how close I was to being in that environment. And I actually did go into a group home briefly before I had my own apartment. And they're like, she doesn't belong here, get her own space. Like, it just created more trouble for me. I got beat up more, my stuff got stolen more. It was just, my grades took a plunge and they ended up getting me my place. But it brought me back there to how there's just not enough love and care to go around for everyone. And so I found myself being like a little bit depressed by that experience. And I went for a massage one day, and my massage therapist had started taking Reiki. And she said, I would like to practice on you. And I was like, okay, cool. What do you mean? She's like, well, I'm taking this modality. It's called Reiki. So are you open to me like doing this for you? And I was like, yeah, sure. And wow, like she brought up stuff that I didn't remember because I had through trauma locked it away. And I don't necessarily know that I was ready for those things. I mean, are we ever ready? But I remember thinking like, I'm in the wrong field. This is not my soul work. And just starting to finally open my eyes to something different at that point.
Wow. You know what I really see through the whole story, Michelle, is I see a lot of grit over and over and over again from day one, rough housing in, on your farm with your siblings, the sticks and the rocks and all the things, moving into, leaving at 15 because of the toxic relationship that you had with your parents, to going to Vancouver and getting in with these bad groups and, having someone, become this intoxicated person who's creating a life for you that you're not looking for, to leaving, which that's insane. You know what I mean? Like you had babies and you had somebody who was like sort of willing to be there for you in some capacity anyway. And you just took off to another province. And so like, I just keep hearing all this grit over and over and over again. And then this moment where this woman does this Reiki, and it feels like to me in your energy, there is this feeling of like letting go of the white-knuckling in that moment. Would you say that you described that?
Absolutely. Like, you nailed it there. It was like, oh, there's something different. Like, I was this like little hood kid. I'm so aware of that. This little farm kid, this little hood kid with gifts that I didn't understand and awarenesses I didn't understand. So I definitely shoved them down and hid them. I shut them off completely. And I think she reminded me that there's not just this way, over and over and over again, recycling the same situation with a different, in a different series, right? To, hey, have you ever considered over here, where you actually get to unlock these things that you've buried out of fear?
Amazing. Well, and I know this to be the beginning of your story, truly. You know, you've got these troubled times, and then your soul begins to soar. What happened from there?
Yeah, definitely the soul began to soar. It was not even a choice anymore, Christine. It was just like, this is what we've been meant for all along. And it wasn't even like, I'm going to serve other people. It was like, oh, I'm going to start to look at all this stuff and unpack it, because there's no other option at this point. I'm full to here with all the garbage and the toxicity and like everyone else's words and everyone else's opinions. And words are really important and powerful to me. And I remember as a kid, the hurtful words that were said, and it was mostly coming from within my home. And I do recall, even to this day, taking those on as truths. And so I think one of the first things I really started to look at was like the power of spoken word, thought word, and taking on what someone else says as your own truth, as opposed to saying, I see that as your opinion and I respect that for you, but that's not me. That's not who I am. And so I think seeing she very quickly became not just my sort of introduction to Reiki, but she showed me some things that I had buried, where it was like, okay, well, it's clear that I cannot go back to that relationship, and, co-parenting and figuring out what that looks like was the only option. And honestly, if she hadn't shown me through her visions and through her spoken word, and actually being so careful and so mindful and compassionate with me on what was coming forward, I don't think that the same route would have been taken. I would have gotten here eventually, but it could have been a lot more painful. And so I remember this big thing, this big trauma that even just thinking about it, it's like very emotional. But I remember it unlocking and finally opening my throat chakra, which had been blocked for so long. I can see that now. In the time I couldn't. And I could actually feel the hands around my neck again. And I immediately, through my third eye, saw it playing out, that experience like a movie. And I bawled on her table, and she had another client coming. So I said, can I just hang out in my car? And she said, please, as long as you need. And I remember crying for at least half an hour. And as I was crying and letting all that go and being like, it's okay, Michelle, like, I love you, Michelle, I could feel the fingers coming off like one by one, and like just this openness. And that was like the biggest like Pandora's box for me in my healing. And I did seek out other types of healers and modalities, because I'm like, well, what else is possible? Like, what else is out there? And sort of in that truth seeking and healing seeking. And just, I think anyone who is awake and aware to this dream within a dream can understand what I mean when it's like, you just have this thirst. And so I followed all the breadcrumb trails, and I started to really open up, and I started to learn the basics of like crystal healing and Reiki and what our chakras are and how the hell do I heal these things. And where does my emotions get stuck, when I don't express them, and how can that create illness in my body? And I remember just sharing these things with like anyone who would listen. And that's literally how I started to find my people. Like, I was like, oh, you're weird too? Cool. Can we be weird together? Like, oh, you're interested in chakras? You read tarot cards and oracle cards? Like, yeah, let's hang out. And I think it was like starting to accept, right? Starting to accept myself and really accept my gifts. And I don't even really like to use that term, because we all are gifted. We all have sight, sense, knowing, right? But it's like, do we choose it? And so I like chose it, and I chose myself. And I let all of that, I let all of that work over into the way that I mothered, the way that I was a partner, the way that I was a friend, and where relationships wouldn't last in my previous, I call it lifetimes, because that's what it feels like. They were growing, and they were sticking around, and I didn't feel anymore that it was like my fault that people left quickly or that relationships didn't last. It was like, okay, they weren't healthy and they weren't meant to be. They taught, we taught each other something and then we moved on. And so I started to really like get okay with that, because as we grow, as you know, it's like not always the same people, not always the same energy, not always the same timeline. And so I think that that's part of what my journey really taught me. And yeah, it wasn't very long after that I had a really beautiful teacher who I definitely aligned with. She's family now. And she kind of carried me through and mentored me through the Reiki levels and ideals. And we just grew so close, and it became like a second nature to work with my hands and work with other people and start to open up the idea of like helping others. And there's so many that start this journey and think, who am I to help anyone? But I'm here to say, like, if you think you're a quarter way through your journey or halfway through, or you have no idea where you're at, just start, because I was only a portion of my healing journey. And I dove right in head first and started helping others. And through helping others in all the many healing modalities I dipped into, I did the healing work too. So it's like, I would go into sessions saying, whatever this person before me needs, like I would also like to receive healing. And so it's never like this sense of giving to anyone from your own reserves. It's like truly just being the open bridge and channel and asking, intention, words, so important. May I also receive the healing that I need, the clearing that I need. Yeah.
Beautiful, beautiful. And I love how you say, if you feel like you're just halfway through or a portion of the way through, just start. Because, I had a coach once tell me that I'd rather learn from somebody who is a block ahead of me than a mile, and isn't that the truth? Right. And so like, I think that, we get stuck in this, I'm not ready, I'm not an expert yet. And so then we never start the things that are pulling at us, the things that are telling us that this is what our soul wants, because we're waiting to be perfect at it. And the true learning does happen when you just start.
It's so true, honestly. And no one ever feels ready for anything. It's like taking that leap. And it does take a little bit of courage. And yeah, releasing fear of failing. I've learned the most through all of my failures, that's for sure.
That's it. Amazing. So do you feel then, I love your story because it's kind of like this, there's a like a BC and an AD. Is that the terms you use? Anyway, there's like a before you and an after you.
Yes,
totally. Do you feel that this was kind of like the secret sauce that you were missing, or did you have coping mechanisms before to help you deal with the traumas that you were going through? Was there a vein that went through all of it, or was it kind of just once you started to realize this spirituality, that's when the true healing took place?
Yeah, honestly, I think the vein that went through everything was the awareness of like nature being the medicine. So I have always been so connected to animals and nature. And anytime I felt overwhelmed or I felt like I took on everyone else's stuff, which was, until I was in my late teens, let's be really honest, I would use nature. And specifically, if I want to get like right to the point, is water. So I remember at one point being given, I went to Sweat Lodge for every Sunday for almost a year before I left Vancouver, just before. And I remember earning my animal totem. And Chief gave me my animal totem after sweat and after fast. And he said, "You are the killer whale." And I literally had a killer whale carving from that I got from this beautiful street person. He used to make really, really good art and sell it and as a means to survive. And I had it hanging up on my wall. And I just remember laughing at how perfect it was, because as a child, up to even now, if I was ever feeling overwhelmed by anything, I'd barefoot be in nature. I'd put my hands on trees. I'd be that kid. I'd be that weirdo. I didn't care at all. And I would stick my hands and feet in the mud or in the sand and be in the river. And I would literally visualize all of the stuff that was too much for me. And whatever that was, it doesn't even need a title or a name, but it would just like flow right off of me. And I remember just thanking nature and being so grateful. But literally, my parents would be super irritated because they couldn't get me out of the water. It'd be like they're going to leave me at the river then. And that's how they kind of got me out. And then anytime at the lake, like same thing. I remember going to my grandparents to the Sunshine Coast, and they lived like right in the cove of the ocean. And same thing. They'd be like, there's a giant purple they're like giant purple stinging jellyfish right there, and then that would get me out. But otherwise it's like, no, you can't get me out of the water. Like it was just too healing. So I think that even if we have no modalities, no training, none of these other tools in our toolkit, we always have Mother Nature. And even today, it's like raining, and I'm like so pulled to just go stand in the rain. And that is healing and clearing in itself. And if we want to add to that, we can even say like, tune into ourselves, close our eyes. What are we feeling? Where do we feel any tightness, any stickiness, any black tar, any thing that feels crunchy, anything that feels like a little bit tense or worrisome? Send our breath there. Let the water wash it away. Let our feet really connect to Mother Earth and ask her with our intentions. This tension I'm feeling in my shoulder, I'm allowing it to melt. I'm letting it go. Please show me what emotion was trapped there, what feeling, what experience. And we all have access to this.
Beautiful tool to add. I absolutely love that. And I love that before you even knew what the word Reiki meant or energy or any of those sorts of things, you were already so drawn to energy, right? In the nature's form.
Yes. Yeah. I was the weird kid talking to animals and birds and like loving on them with my hands. And yeah, it's so cool. And thank you for the opportunity to like go back and share these things, because it's like, as I'm sharing in my heart, I'm having like these like little aha moments of like, oh wow, yeah, maybe there was some like unconscious, slightly conscious awareness there of what I was doing to help myself to heal. Yeah.
Definitely. And I love you say water, right? Some people it's fire, some people it's earth. Like everyone has something that causes their nervous system to just, like come down. It connects you to something beyond yourself. And I think that this is such a great tool to leave people who have gone through these experiences, who are going through something right now, that maybe you don't have the money to go get a Reiki treatment, or maybe energy work isn't your bag, but you can find something in nature that is going to help you just kind of have that nervous system. And like, I love that sound, because that's really what it feels like. It's like,
Exactly. Dropping in, coming into the body. And I think that's another important part of choosing to be in the body, is through traumatic experiences or through fearful experiences, without even being necessarily consciously aware, we're projecting our energy outside of the body. And it can feel safer to be outside of the body because of anything that has occurred in this beautiful past, in our past, that the cells remember, even if the mind doesn't remember. So it's like, by breathing ourselves back home to our physical being, by breathing in nature and taking in her codes, her light codes, her earth codes, the wind codes, the fire codes, everything from every animal and every tree and every plant, that's where we really get to tune in with ourselves and the external and the internal, which are one. Like, we are literally part of Earth, she's part of us. So by listening outside, we're listening within, and vice versa. And that alone is a nervous system reset that's coming into balance and harmony within and without. So I love nature. Just get out and walk barefoot and touch some trees.
Hell yeah. And I love how you speak. There's this fluidity to it. It's within, without. Like, you're just, yeah. I love the way you speak. I've always been so attracted to the way that you speak. I'm curious, what do you do now? Where has your crazy grit, bravery brought you to? What do you do for work now?
Yes. So package all of those parts of me up because I welcome them all home to my table. There was many years where I want to disassociate from past Michelle, the hardened version of me, the little street hood kid, the one that had to fight to survive in many different aspects. And really like look at her and love her, and through all the ages. So like little Michelle to like teen Michelle to the early 20s Michelle, when she started to be like, okay, like enough is enough, like I'm taking back my power and I'm gonna, you know, own creatorship of my experience. It really led me into the path of like, it's okay and safe to be me and safe to be in the body. And so to really start to heal like my self-image internally and externally. And I got into, after crystal healing, I got into shamanism, finished my Reiki master. And then I found sound healing, and I'm like, I've always loved sound. I've always used music as a way to come back home to myself. And if I felt any kind of way, I would encourage that emotion with music. So if I needed a good cry, I would play something that would invoke that cry to come forward. Or if I needed some uplifting and dancing and movement to move the energy in and out of my body, I would do that. And I had this sort of like, wow moment of, I've been working with this tool all along, and so have we all. And it's not something new, it's quite ancient. And so sound healing's gained so much popularity now, and it's prevalent everywhere. And I love that because it's truly an instantaneous shift of our frequency. So every chakra system that we have, major energy system in our body, all the nadis, every access point where energy comes in and out of our physical being, which isn't actually physical, is all wavelengths, is all sound, is all crystalline energy, is water. Well, you take crystals, you take water, and you take sound and vibration. That is pure energy, and it's a fast way to shift in and out of something. So if we're feeling low, we can raise our frequency and vibration instantaneously through whatever it is that we're needing. And so all these different hertz are like easily accessible, and there's charts and everything like that that'll tell you what chakra system is influenced by which frequency and which hertz. And it's like tuning a radio station to get that perfectly fine tune that you're looking for. And so if we can see ourselves as flowing matter, we can understand how light therapy, sound therapy, vibrational therapy can heal and balance us and bring the physical energetic body into total harmony and peace. And when everything is in the right frequency and it's harmonious, there is no illness, there is no imbalance. And that's mind, body, spirit. That's etheric. That's everything. So I could nerd out on this all day, but
I love it. I love it. I'm here for it.
Yeah. So I think that these different ways to heal are married and beautifully harmonious together, because we can use our hands, and humans love touch. We need touch, as we learned over, you know, the pandemic and all that stuff, how healing touches. When you take it away, you especially realize how much you need it. So community, connection, and touch. So you take the power of everyone's hands who chooses to be a bridge or a helper for someone else by simply placing hands on anyone, and the intention to bring forth life force energy. Then you incorporate in sound healing and vibrations, and it's like, you know, we no longer need to necessarily talk through over and over what we've been through or bring new energy and life to our traumas if we're not at that phase in our life. I see the value of all of those things, and we sometimes can come to a point where it's like, okay, now I'm ready to try something else, right? So using them all together. So I really see the beauty and the collaboration of these modalities. And when we're not really able to or ready to, or we're tired of talking things through, these vibrations just go in, they rattle things loose, and they release them. And we can feel good, and we can feel better, and we can use this tool on our own. We don't need anyone else to have access to that. So again, coming back to nature and the ways that we can heal for free. And I just love that. So oftentimes people will say, like, how can I keep healing when they come to a sound bath that I've been hosting or co-hosting with someone? And I'll say, here's some links. Go onto YouTube, whatever you're feeling. If your heart's hurting, if you're moving through breakup, if you're moving through grief, if you feel unrooted, ungrounded, like, here, check out these frequencies. Just type into YouTube or any platform that you use, root chakra healing frequency, for example. Or if you need help sleeping, and if you need help healing rapidly, there's also hertz for that, 174 hertz. So it's really accessible, and I love that. So what I'm doing right now is really just incorporating like all the modalities that I'm interested in, that are at the forefront of my practice. I just finished taking Quantum Healing Hypnosis and Past Life Regression. So that's brand new. That's really exciting and on my heart. I've been seeing clients for those sessions now. I think 21 clients. So I only know the number because I'm 4 away from being out of the intern space and into the practitioner space on Dolores's website, which is huge. So little Saskatchewan will be on the map on Dolores's page. It's kind of cool. So
cool.
Yeah, just incorporating all that and helping people. And then I do love to do community events, as you know, because it's a way for, again, accessibility, affordability for everyone to come and to receive. And, it's a little bit more to come one-on-one, but if you can gather your friends and come and get comfy and cozy and just like receive the sound waves and guided meditations and sometimes different plants and different herbs that will burn and things like that. So yeah, that's kind of where I'm at right now.
Amazing. Well, and I also saw on the gram that it looks like you are moving into public speaking as well. So that's extraordinary.
Yes, I don't know where that's going to go. I think it's more like events and playing sound baths and things like that. Yeah.
Cool. I love it. All beautiful. All so great.
Yeah.
From this is truly a story, from pain to power. You've gone through so much and you've brought in such a beautiful feminine energy. And I was going to mention, you talk about sound, and even just this tenor and sound of your voice is very calming. So you have skills in so many ways. And so, yeah, I'm really grateful to hear your story. And to really open up the idea that there are so many different ways of connecting, whether it be nature or, energy work or God or whatever it is that speaks to you. If you're in a dark place, you can be brave enough to pack up 2 kids and move to a different province. Like, it can be done.
Yes, it definitely can. And I think that it's also really empowering too. Like, I'm sure by the work that you're in, that when you've moved through something as big as that feels, because I know it was really big for me, you tend to become a magnet for more of those people who are going through the same thing or have just sort of stepped into that experience. And then that's where we get to be the guide, if that's what we choose, right? To support others.
Absolutely. Well, on that note, where can people find you if they're looking for guidance from you?
Yeah, for sure. My website, sovereignsoul.ca.
Extraordinary. Amazing. Okay. Well, thank you, Michelle, for being part of the podcast. It's been an absolute pleasure, and I look forward to chatting more and having you on again, I'm sure.
Thank you so much, Christine. Appreciate it.
Thank you so much for listening. If you loved this last episode, then consider rating the podcast. Those few seconds that it takes makes a huge difference. Also, if you are interested in mentorship, transformational programs, or reading the book Unbroken, Rising Above, Thriving Within, then take a look at the show notes for all the resources and links. Always remember, you can overcome any obstacle. Let's do this together.